Hello and welcome to Founders Amplified, where we spotlight underrepresented founders who are driving innovation and impact across various industries and sectors across the globe. I'm your host, Narayan Kulkarni, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Today's guest is Lolita Ejiofor. Lolita Ejiofor is the founder of Accelerate Her Africa and host of the We Win podcast, but her journey to purpose wasn't a straight line. Born and raised in the UK but of Nigerian descent, Lolita spent years leading high-stakes tech projects across aerospace, UK government, and IT consulting. In 2013, she returned to Nigeria, where she became a banking executive for 12 years, driving digital transformation and people and culture change programs that repositioned a leading mortgage bank. On paper, she had it all: the titles, the expertise, the impact. But something was missing. While pursuing her MBA at Holt International Business School in 2024, Lolita experienced an awakening. She had been living with privilege, but without purpose. That realization changed everything. She launched Accelerate Her Africa in April 2025, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering African women through coaching, mentorship, and Pan-African innovation rooted in equity and smart governance. Through her We Win podcast, launched in October 2025, she's building a movement, one story at a time, proving that it's never too late to step into your purpose. Her podcast is igniting conversations that are giving women permission to find and amplify their voices, creating ripples of transformation across communities. Lolita isn't just opening doors. She's teaching other women how to build their own. And her story proves that the greatest transformation often begins with the courage to admit, I was made for more than this. So, now that you know a little bit more about Lolita, let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to Founders Amplified, Lolita. It is so great to have you with us. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for inviting me to your platform. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so glad to be able to share my story.
Thanks so much for letting me know. And again, great to have you with us on this episode. So now let's get started. And I'd like to start by learning a little bit more about your journey. So could you tell
Yeah,
me and our audience what led you to become a founder, and if there are any particular moments or experiences that sparked that decision?
sure. Honestly, it wasn't a moment of inspiration. Unlike most founders, it was more of a confrontation. Um, 26 years of working in corporate, in the aerospace and the financial sector, and the government sector, and really successful, very comfortable. But I was living very small. I was just living for myself. And so I went ahead to pursue my MBA in 2022. And somewhere along the line, between, case studies and class activities, I started to just notice how unfulfilled I was. I noticed a lot of my classmates were talking big things that they were doing, impacts they were having, and I felt like, what is going on? And so I saw myself as somebody who was living really small, being very unproductive, and being selfish in terms of my lifestyle and giving opportunities to other people. So along the line, I felt like my comfort was stripped away from me, and I went through this period of silence and an exile, I would call it. And I started to question myself, and I really felt that God was telling me that I am not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I knew that I wanted to do something to support women, but more importantly, I wanted to ensure that um, I was I was a living proof that it's not too late. I felt the urge to actually help other women in my situation who are in corporate and stirring and realizing that they're not living their purpose. So that's why Accelerate Her Africa became a baby of mine, which has just blown up. It's become such a huge movement for me now. And a lot of things now since starting Accelerate Her in April have become more open. And so it's just become, what would I call it? It was inadvertently that I became a founder.
Well, thanks so much for sharing. I especially appreciate two things that I heard. So first of all, I heard that it sounds like you were and I interesting use the word exile almost, and that like it was almost like there was a world inside and a world outside that were kind of diverging, but then there was a desire to then go ahead and make a bigger impact. And also another thing that I appreciate you mentioned was being an example to people, say in similar situations, for example, being in corporate then wanting to make a bigger impact. And also another thing that I heard, which is kind of the pretext for my next question, which is it sounds like you specifically wanted to be a support to African women, but also had a really deep interest, passion for empowering and advocating for other women. So I'd love to know a little bit more about
Yes.
that. So can you
Yeah.
tell me about why you wanted to become a advocate for and supporter of African women,
Yeah.
and more broadly, what drives your passion for becoming an advocate for women, and just generally like we can also say more
Yeah.
broadly, like being a someone who's a person of activism.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a late bloomer. I'm not going to deny that. Started launching Accelerate Her at 55. It's because of the decades of experience and how I've normalized just, going through the motions. And in Africa, it is very, very common for women to be in a very patriarchal situation and gradually start to lose their voice. They are somewhat taught and the society influence is that the men are in charge and therefore we women we can pitch in but not necessarily our decisions are not really always being taken into account and broadly there is a sense of second rating for African women. And it's not just career women. There are also women who are younger women coming up. They're taught, the men are more important to respect the men, respect the system, to be able to pitch in when they are called in. So not necessarily just show up and be bold and bright about it. But what the world doesn't realize, and especially Africa, they don't realize that when women are completely passionate and feel valued, that they put in more than what they are meant to do. They will work hard. They will manage the family home. They will still cook. They will still show up even if they're ill because they are driven by the passion and the sense of being included into something bigger. So I really want African women because our voices are just not as powerful as the men. The African societies are losing out on being productive and being progressive because the women are standing back. And there is also a sense of it becomes internalized. So we then start to live small, even though we're in corporates, even though we're in senior roles, we live small because we're not opening doors for other African women to come up. There isn't a sort of a ladder where other people coming into corporate can go. And then we talk about those that don't go into corporate who need funding for their business. It is a known fact that women are better at paying back loans for if they're giving startup loans for their businesses, and they are known for their default rate is known to be far lower than when men do take loans. But you find that there is a reluctance for these banks to aid women in their businesses. For whatever reason that is, it is, I would say it's inadvertently societal influence. What can a woman do that is going to change the world? It's all about the men who are changing, who are game changers. So, being Nigerian of origin and UK raised and been there for years, I have best of both worlds. And I understand the Western way of working, the corporate environment, and the non-corporate environment. But I also understand the context of Africa. So I'm able to merge the two. And I want to now dedicate myself into one, telling corporates, hey, this is the time for you to enable your women, empower them, make sure that they are brought into decision making processes so that we have a more balanced outcome when it comes to dealing with issues or even being creative. Women are very creative when they feel the fuel and the fire of acceptance and growth. But where they are being undermined, they tend to sort of stay in their spaces. So I want to encourage women to have a sense of duty and purpose. It's so important that they understand their purpose so that they align very quickly with the task at hand. So I'm really driven by the fact that I came from brokenness. So from a place of weakness, of pain, of wandering around in the wilderness and coming to this point where I am today. And I think that was my journey. I had to go through that to really appreciate that. One, it's never too late. Two, that my experience has taught me things that I can now apply and support other women that are coming up.
Wow, amazing points that you made. There's so many wonderful perspectives you shared. A few things which I really appreciate you shared. So first of all, uh, I heard the word late bloomer, and in my view, and also, I mean, I've had lots of conversations with family as well, on things, and I think when I hear that word and when like, because for example, I'm from India. I was born in India, but I lived the vast majority of my life in the U.S. Um, so like I'm in this like many like diasporic people. We're kind of in this third space where like we have both identities, but people in neither place think of us as completely them. But also in that times, sometimes like time scales and also cultural perspectives can be a bit different than in both places. So for example, in cultures like the US, for example, and you see this in the UK, there's very much of a quote unquote, we can say quote archetypally masculine type of way of working in terms of like getting things done very fast, individualistically, emphasis on youth. But in cultures like say India, for example, you've talked about this in Nigeria, for example, as well. I've spoken to a number of Nigerian guests. There are different traditions where there is an emphasis on like collectivism, there's an emphasis
Right.
on family. We can say quote archetypally feminine things in a certain sense if we want to use that word. But at the same time, to a point they made, there are many complex factors that shape how a culture develops, and many complex factors that shape, for example,
Correct.
who is empowered or who has been empowered. And sadly, you've talked about Nigeria. I would also say India in certain ways as well, and a number of other countries in Asia and Africa. And also, of course, like in many parts of the world, also in parts of the US too, there is, but in many parts of the world, women are severely held back from their rightful role of authority, and
Yeah.
also like I would say globally, um, due to a emergent from lack of development, emergent from individuals not having a level of consciousness and completeness of what it means to be human, and from all the consequences of that, to a point that you made, which I also appreciate you've talked about, women feel like they don't have the voices that they should be having. There's like not that perspective that you need to have, and also sadly that has systemic effects. Again, I want to fully recognize I don't self-identify as a woman. I will never have that experience, but like I do believe that like women have been extremely important in my life, and I think it's very important that I, for example, support other women around the world, because there are also women around the world who have done that. So I appreciate that people like you are giving a voice to this very important issue, and also I want to applaud you for being someone who specifically
Yeah.
is supporting women in your cultural context as well, but also having a broad global perspective and being able to give your voice
Correct.
into a really important space, which is not only it sounds personally resonant, but also has significant global impacts with the tangible ones, as you've talked about in terms of say like lower default rates, also like higher productivity, etc. That's also known in like venture capital investment, and like where if women are supported, they have much higher at a base level like top line ROI. But there are also so many other transformational
Yeah.
impacts in society and ripple effects when women are
Yes.
supported. So I really appreciate those things. But now, but But that leads me, and I'm curious about the ways in which you are actualizing that support, specifically through Accelerate Africa, and how that might be different from others. So, could you tell me a little bit more about how your approach with Accelerate Her Africa
Yeah.
and the work that you're doing might be a bit different from others that are very similarly working in gender equality and in similar spaces?
Yeah. So in with Accelerate Her Africa, we're not just focusing on empowering women, because empowering women is about, yes, you can do it, but we're also focused on accelerating them. So removing barriers, opening doors so that they move a lot faster. Because some women initiatives, they focus on skills, training, funding, but we tend to focus on purpose first, because it's really important that people understand that what they're doing is aligned with what they would enjoy doing, and they see themselves fulfilling and sticking to, and getting a sense of, this is what I was put on this earth to do. So what I have is I have my podcast where I invite women, female guests, to tell their stories, and their stories are their journeys. So there's no like case studies, all about their journeys, and these are ways that women are opening up and giving you insights as to how they have gone from beginning till now. And one word keeps coming up every single time, and that's purpose. Some discover it really early, some discover it late, like me. But on top of that, we do coaching and mentoring to help women to consolidate what they are, how they can realize their purpose and what they are doing, and stick to that, and have a sense of direction as to where they're going. But we're not only stopping at purpose, we're building a comprehensive educational ecosystem to empower women through STEM, so that women who, because STEM is an area where a lot of women are a bit shy, a bit afraid of digital technology, all of those big things. They feel a little bit afraid. They think it's a very masculine dominated area. But the younger women coming up, and some of the older ones like myself, are realizing that there's nothing so scary. It's all about what is the future? Where is the future going? How can I be part of that future? So it's for women who are pivoting in. So these are the younger ones going into corporate, going into entrepreneurship, understanding, building those skills and aligning them to their purpose, as well as women pivoting out. So women coming out of corporate who are saying, what am I going to do? And I tell you that literally, I just left without. I had my why, I did not know have my how. I just said, God, please guide me, because I do not know what I'm doing or how I'm going to do it. But I got a sense of assurance. I felt really assured in myself that as far as this aligns with my purpose, that the doors will open. So it's a way of helping women on that journey, and even understanding my story, that it's not too late. It's not, I'm too old, or and the younger people understanding you don't have to go around the longest routes, pivoting left, right, and center. As far as you understand your purpose, you can go straight for it. So it's a very distinct way of helping women to really look deepwards, so be introspective before they make that leap as to the kind of roles they want to play in life. So that's how Accelerate Her is different.
Wow, well said. I really appreciate the part that you made about purpose, because to your point, yes, one who identifies one purpose, that can be a powerful accelerant, both in terms of outer results, but also internally. And also, I love that you're talking about how you are with Accelerator Africa supporting women in STEM. And to a point that you made, and I've also seen this because, so again, I have an older sister and also a mom who are both like leaders in their own ways in medicine. But also, I have like done a lot of initiatives supporting women in STEM, both like people who are very young, but also experienced founders who are like in like building in STEM related areas. Yes, to your point, there is nothing absolutely. I love the word you instead of the expression of there's nothing that's scary in STEM, but it's sometimes just a potential reframe, seeing people who are like one in that field, also having the support system. And yes, there are organizations out there, nonprofit and for profit, that do that, as well as initiatives within organizations that are doing that. The last thing, which I love that you mentioned, which I also want to dwell upon a little bit, is the point about timing. So to think something that I said earlier, I think and I think you and I both know this very well, and some of our audience may or may not know this what I'm about to say very well, but like I think when it comes to every single human being on this world is extremely valuable in their own way, in their own story. I think the world, due to the way that the outer results have been manifested in this world, there is if we want to use the term bias, or there's a preference in terms of certain external results, or like certain appearances people have, certain financial results, if we want to say that, or certain metrics. However, or like a deep specialized way of working. However, every single person is valuable, and like finding one's own way to that result. There is a truth in saying that everyone will realize their valuable purpose in to the collective whole in whatever course their path takes. Now,
Correct.
diving a little bit more deeply, it could be someone who is, to use a word that you shared earlier, a late bloomer, who like they go ahead and they find their like life purpose, say in their 60s, but they have accumulated extraordinary depth of experience, and maybe they might like only do like one or two external things, but those could either be like billion-dollar things in outer results,
Yes,
or those could sow the seeds for like trillion-dollar transformation later.
very
Or it could
true.
be someone like in the classical way, they're like, yeah, they're like 9 or 10, or like in undergrad, they get to like the elite schools, then they like build like the giant like company, or they like make the extraordinary social impact, and they become
Yes,
like celebrated in society. But at the same
yes,
time, they might be pigeonholed into a certain career and not really realize their full potential. So, or
yes,
they might like have their potential realized, but like that can maybe have a different wave in a certain way, or the narrative of society will construct it in a certain way where like it fits the prevailing narrative. So I just think it's really important for people to know, and I appreciate that you're talking about this. Purpose is valuable, but it's really subjective, and it is but best to see purpose in the context of the individual rather than in the results that society is seeing, because that only paints one side of the picture, and every single person's purpose is unique and extraordinarily valuable in whatever
yeah,
way that will show up.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think there are loads of people who pivot to go all the way around, but then that's where they were supposed, that was how they were meant to go, to really appreciate and understand what they're meant to do and what their purpose is. So yes, I agree with you.
Right. And I think this is an extremely important point for groups, individuals, ways of thinking, people who are underrepresented, if we want to use that broader term. And why Founders Amplify is to amplify stories of such individuals. We can think about those like in terms of underrepresented identities. For
Yeah,
example, people identified as women, people regions of the world that are underrepresented, like places like Africa or Asia, or like the global
yeah,
majority countries, for example, or like
yeah.
even more diverse thinking styles. So people who are neurodiverse, people who have like more quote unquote introvert, if we want to use that word,
Mm,
or more
mm,
introspective styles. Like I, for example, am a highly introspective person. There is significant introspective depth that I have, which I have not realized yet, but will be realizing soon, right? And I know that people like you and people like others, there's significant potential that you have realized in the world, but there's also significant other potential that you have, which you are realizing in your own way, which
yes,
it will be a matter of time that people will go ahead and
yes,
understand. Yes, like Lolita did so many awesome things as well, but also don't like hang up the phone yet, because Lolita has so many other things that are going to be there. So I just think that like the world needs to be aware of and tolerant of that timing that every individual has. And that actually
yeah,
leads me to my next question. So all that I just shared, and what you also shared as well, that leads to the point of like knowing that individuals have their own time, their own way of realizing what's going to happen. That impact will look different. But I'm curious at a high level. So let's say in around 5 to 10 years, what are you seeing then that tells us now, that tells you now that what you're doing with Accelerate Her Africa is working?
yeah. So I'm expecting a measurable shift in African women's leadership representation. There needs to be a conscious effort, especially in corporates, the traditional corporates. There needs to be a shift in terms of how many women are on the board level and in the C-suite. And there needs to be a consciousness, and it has to be conscious leadership, which would lead to more corporates adopting. I believe that there are guidelines, especially for financial institutions in Nigeria, for instance, where they are expected to have at least 40% of women in the C-suite and the corporate. But there isn't a sense of like, it's more like a tick in the box, or some are not doing it at all. There's no real sense of urgency that I've yet to really feel. So the will is there, but they say the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. There is a sense of, yes, we will do this, but it's not really being seen as a way of a culture, a cultural acceptance. But I think there is a consciousness. There's a certain consciousness where there's that shift is already starting. But it's for us women to show up as well, to put ourselves forward and not be afraid that, and not be gazumped by the male voices around us. I also feel that in 5 years' time, there will be a network effect. So there'll be more women who are coaching and mentoring women who are coaching the next generation. And there are more women launching businesses and hiring other women. And so there's this ripple effect. It's so important when you sponsor another woman, how that feels when that woman thrives and then sponsors another woman. So this exponential impact will be a common feature I see going on in Africa. Also, there would be a cultural shift in terms of how African women see themselves. They right now, they are so brilliant and they're doing so much, but they're living small. They're not like, I don't want to like my light, let me dim it. I don't want to like, oh, I can't speak now. Maybe it's not a good time. I need to wait for permission. They need to show up. They need to show up and say, listen, if I can't be invited to the table, I need to build my own and invite others to my table. So there is already a consciousness. I've attended quite a few conferences and where there are a lot of women speaking about these things, but it's all about how do we incorporate them? When we leave the conference, do we go back to our offices and sit down and go back to that level of thinking? Or are we saying to ourselves, no more? I am going to speak at this meeting because I have a point to make, which makes sense. And I'm going to seek, I would not seek validation before I speak. I will just be in my own way, speaking in and driving the narrative of when I can speak. So I think there is, as I mentioned to you before, just being in parts of other initiatives that are working towards women empowerment. I'm seeing a lot of things that are happening, and the kind of mentees I'm meeting, they already understand, especially the younger women, they understand that they want to achieve, they want to grow, and they understand the limitations, but they're still going for it. They're still pushing themselves. And this wasn't like that in my time. In my time, there was no such thing as, push what? Where are you pushing to? But there is a general change in the mindsets of these people. And I feel like that in 5 years' time will start to really come to fruition, and it will be generational.
Well said. I love the fact you're talking about. I love that you mentioned generational change and network effects, because that is, I think, a key aspect of when 5 to 10 years, that time scale, you start to see some of that. And then to a point that I also appreciate you mentioned, was a shift in culture needs to go is really important, and there are many ways to do that. We can think of, so in the context of Africa, for example, we can think about like broader things like the UN SDGs and like attention to the global majority, and a lot of high level work in places like Africa, for example. I think that that's one thing, but also just generally like the population of Africa has been like, again, you and I know it's like Africa's a young but gradually
Yeah.
upcoming population into like the and so like there's a lot of like energy, ideas, innovation in all different parts of Africa,
Yeah.
which is coming up, and I think is very exciting. But to a point that you made, of course, I think there is an aspect of that needs to permeate into constructs like you mentioned, for example, board quotas for women's leadership. Yes, having quotas there, but it needs to come from within. Also, within a continent as complex as Africa, within any place that is very complex, and with individuals
Yes.
who have multiple intersecting marginalized identities, it is important to understand and think through that and the nuance of what that means. And again, no understanding how
Mhm.
that's personal to every single person, but also people with the same or similar groups of identities need to connect with one another and have that space, but also have enough space for them to work in their own ways.
Yeah.
So in Africa, for example, one might say, yes, there needs to be within African perspectives, people who are within like the same, for example, tribal groups or like ethnicities or also like
Yes.
countries or as well as like regions like that like multi uh, micro meso macro perspective, and those networks need to be there in addition to, of course, like
Yeah.
diasporic networks and addition that are already there, as well as like multi-continent networks that are there, but also to an emphasis on things like justice and etc. So like, and also like
Yes.
again layering in, for example, as you've talked about, which is extremely important, empowering of women. And that means something very different in an African continental context versus a European or American context. It means something very different in places like, for example,
Correct.
Nigeria, Christian Nigeria versus Muslim Nigeria versus like Egypt or like South Africa or like Kenya. Like there's so much differences. So I just think I love that you're talking about generational impact, but I also want to underscore that there's a nuance around that one needs to think about in the context of an individual person and how that is layered and multidimensional for every single individual. But yeah, to your point, time is exciting, and with time, one of course sees different perspectives and will see different openings, and that leads me to my next question. So I'm sure that you've had a lot of um, experiences that have led you to this point. Lots of quite a journey along the way in being a founder, and you've learned quite a bit of things. So, what can you maybe share one or two things you know now that you wish you had known before you had started?
Yeah. That's the easiest question. I wish I knew that you don't need to have it all figured out before you start. I think a lot of the time I was like, founder, me? No way. What's your business? I will support you. What's your business? I'll work for you. I always felt that I had to have these blocks and this business plan and have all this funding and all of those things. But when I founded Accelerate Her in April, it was by purely blind faith. Blind faith. I just had the willingness to go in obedience according to God's will because it was time and it was screaming. My whole body was screaming. You need to do this or you will implode. You will just go into depression, And so the lowest hanging fruit for me was to start the podcast, and it hit the top 30% in the first month of podcasts globally because these are stories. They're not my stories. I'm not trying to create a narrative for people. These are just people just telling it. And the interesting thing was that I was keeping all these recordings. I had like up to 17 recordings I had. And I was afraid to put them out because I said it's going to be my voice talking. And I didn't want to hear my voice. I felt that my voice was just in my ears. But having put them out, I made a decision to put them out there, and then the response was just really overwhelming. And I've met people just who've come to me and said, "Oh, I heard this story. I really resonated with me. What can I do? How can I be part of this movement that and it gives me a sense of fulfillment that something is happening here and it's really really making sense. It's not like I had everything in place. The other thing I noticed even from one of my guests is that we can't all be perfect, and wait for and present ourselves to venture capitalists or to investors and have all the answers. Just start with what you have. Start with something, however, whatever you have. Just start with it. Do something, and then the rest will be added on to go for me.
Well said. I really appreciate that you've talked about, to rephrase, like there's never a wrong time to start to just get started. That, of course, that echoes a lot of standard personal development wisdom, but also,
Yeah,
again, like, and I think to a point I want to again emphasize, it's really about the timing and when it's an individual journey and understanding that like what is right for one person in their own context is really important. Yes, to one that you've made,
yeah,
yes, it sounds like for many African women, that's an important thing and a message that needs to be heard. I will also say, to add to this, yes, it's a very important message for any individual who feels marginalized or underrepresented to hear and understand that, like, but also, of course, trusting in the timing that will be taken, whether that is God's timing, whether that is the timing of source, or what, like, however, if one is a more spiritual person, like I know you and I are, like trusting that, like, sense of broader or higher timing, but just, or if you're more, not so much, then going ahead and just, again, understanding the factors and then being able
mm,
to, um,
yeah, well,
I love that you mentioned, yeah, not needing to figure things out like internally before going externally. It's about like understand that unique dynamic of the internal external is unique to every single person and making that happen. Now, you've again, thank you so much for sharing lots of different perspectives on your work. And I'm curious,
oh.
and as we wind down, a few more rapid fire questions. How can people find you and how can they support your work?
Very easily. I'm on the We Win podcast, which stands for Women Elevating, Women Igniting, and Navigating. They just need to search on it on Apple, on all the streaming podcast streaming platforms. So that's one way, at least, they can understand this kind of stories and listen to the stories of other women. And of course, I'm on. We have our website www.accelerateherafrica.org, where you can also see the podcast, but also understand what we do and why we're trying to do what is behind what we do. And there are ways they can connect with me on LinkedIn, on all the social media platforms. I'm available there. So it'd be great for people who align with the vision of women empowerment, and that does not exclude men. There are a lot of men I've met along the way who are also very much interested in women coming into their own. So male or female, I'm happy to connect, and it would be great where we could partner as well. I'm happy to collaborate with initiatives, especially learning initiatives, coaching initiatives, and for women who are in out of reach places where there's no infrastructure, so technological infrastructure, where they are no learning tools, no schools, like the northern parts of Nigeria, where education is not a priority for them. It's all about getting, being born, getting married. So where we can help with the outreach, I'm happy to work with initiatives that explore these areas and want to give those ladies a chance to actually not just be in a production line down the marriage route, but actually build for themselves and add to their community.
Thanks so much for sharing, Lolita. And to our audience, you can see all of the links that she has shared in the show notes, as well as other links to get in touch with her. So now it's time for our signature question. Can you please fill in the blank? I amplify
Women's voices. It is so important that we speak up, we show up. It is also important to know it's never too late. No matter how your journey may seem, your time will come. It is part of your curation. It's part of your journey to be forged through fire and go through pain and go from pain into purpose. But when you get there, speak out, help others also to speak out. So I amplify women's voices.
well said, very profound. But also, I love that you explained the why as well. And for people who have like, who are listening to this podcast, again, I think one thing which I want you to just bear in mind is that, like, yes, like guests will have profound, succinct answers, but not many guests will answer for the reasons why, and Lolita is one of them. And so, I actually wants to use that as a perspective to then, as I conclude the episode, first of all, I want to thank you so much, Lolita, for being on the podcast, sharing your perspectives on Accelerator Africa and the impacts that is driving for our world, but also want to celebrate you for being an incredible underrepresented founder and an individual that's leading change. So to this point, I love the fact that you're emphasizing purpose and you're modeling intention. I think that's very important in both a broad, accessible, universal perspective, but also in a way that is clearly resonant with your own experience, but also in a way that is truly resonating with African women. I love that you're doing that with the structure of your We Win podcast and also with the specific initiatives that you're talking about. I really appreciate that you've emphasized the aspect of, in your words, being a late bloomer, but also understanding that you've talked about the emphasis of trust in time. I know I've talked about that as well, but also understanding as well that there is with that timing, seizing the opportunity and being proactive. And I love that you have implicitly, but also very clearly, implicitly, and you've also mentioned more explicitly, you clearly understand systemic factors that shape the unique experiences of African women, and you are in an action-oriented way, in your own way, being an example that is of someone who is relationally minded, but also very pragmatic, but also very attuned to how to implement change in different ways at both structural levels, like with collaborations, but also in more frontline advocacy ways, if we want to talk about that. Use those words with your podcast, for example. So I want to emphasize those things, and again, want to honor you for being an outstanding founder, an underrepresented individual who is being a beacon of change in our world, and is going ahead and not only being a model and a positive representation for people who are like you, but also in similar concepts, but also just being someone who is creating change in her own way. So thank you so much, Lolita.
Thank you so much, Nari. And it's been such a huge pleasure. I've enjoyed every minute. Thank you for summing me up so nicely. It's really good to hear. But I really appreciate you giving me a voice and this opportunity. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. I'm sure we'll be in touch. We'll have a number of conversations after this. But as it's the end of our episode, I'd like to say bye for now, Lolita.
Bye-bye.
To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Founders Amplified. I hope you're feeling as inspired as I am. If you'd like to learn more about our guests and support them, check out the show notes for their details. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating, share it with someone you know, and follow us for more inspiring episodes like this one. If you're a founder who is driving innovation and impact in any industry or sector anywhere in the world and would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Check out the show notes for more information. And finally, remember that you, yes, you, have the power to amplify the voices around you. Whether you're a colleague, family member, friend, funder, mentor, or just another fellow human, your support matters. So I invite you to celebrate and uplift the underrepresented innovators in your life who are driving innovation and impact. Let's create a better future for everyone, together. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep amplifying.